Okay, hi everyone. I know we're still a minute away from starting, but I just wanted to say hi and to encourage all of you to feel free to use the chat feature and maybe introduce yourself, say where you're from. I always love seeing where people are from. I am calling in from Seattle, which is somewhat sunny this morning, which is really exciting for us because we've had about a month of rain. And yeah, if feel free to say hi on the chat. Hello, yes, hi Frank. Um, yeah, so I'm gonna start about in a minute. We have a lot of content here, and I want to make sure you guys get the most value out of this hour, and that we still have time, a bit of time left over from. Oh, Valerie, hi. Yeah, it is beautiful in Seattle. That we do have time for a Q&A at the end. So if you are joining late, if you did join late, for anyone that is going to join late, there will be a recording. If you need to leave early, there is a recording that will be emailed to you tomorrow. So just look out for that in your email inbox. And as always, feel free to email me or contact me on my site. And you can always reach me that way in case you missed the recording email for whatever reason. Okay, so we got Dublin, we got Tunisia, Michigan, more Michigan. We got Ontario, Chicago. That's amazing. Okay, so great. From India, Ohio, Ljubljana. That's amazing. I think I said that right. Lebanon. Okay, so we have quite the international audience today, which is super exciting. I was originally born in Ukraine, and I've lived around in different places. So I definitely love seeing people from different places on here. So just to begin with, my name is Alessia Luraski. I am a leadership and high performance coach. I also work at the Institute of Coaching, which is an affiliate of Harvard Medical School. And I help with marketing there and all kinds of different initiatives. I do some psychology research as well. And I'm excited to be here with you guys and help you kind of really utilize this year and to achieve the goals that you guys want to achieve. So just for a quick kind of schedule for today, just move some things around. These are some of the things we're going to be covering. This is not all that we'll be covering, but just to show you guys what is on the agenda. Like I said previously, I will try to move quickly because there's quite a bit of content to cover, but there will be a recording. All right, so we know that there are a lot of productivity tools out there. I feel like this slide should come with almost like a seizure warning because it really represents the fact that there are just so many productivity tools, videos, books, all kinds of things on YouTube. We all can agree that there are sufficient productivity techniques and tools out there. And if the tool was the source of you being productive, we would not be here right now. The fact that there are so many resources and tools for productivity actually indicates that none of them are solving the real problem when it comes to productivity. So why is productivity so hard? The real problem here is belief. And in particular, it is our thoughts around our goals and actions. And more specifically, our lack of belief in these three areas: our belief in ourselves, our belief in the goal, and our belief in the process. And I'll actually go into each of these in more specifics in a few minutes, but first let's go back to tools, tips, and productivity systems. So you all have a productivity tool that works, or you can at least think of one that would work for you, or at worst, you can just search on YouTube productivity tips and find all kinds of new ways to be productive. Most of these things work, and we know they work. The issue is actually getting yourself to do them. And this is the reason why we all aren't like productivity masters with all these tools out there. The productivity experts miss the most important part of productivity, and that is our minds and the beliefs we carry around with us that are automatic. Okay, so what is a belief? According to the dictionary definition, a belief is something that we think is true. And the scientific definition is beliefs are enduring, unquestioned, ontological representations of the world and comprise of primary convictions about events, causes, agency, and objects that subjects use and accept as true. So how do we get from the point of thinking that how do we get to the point that thinking a particular thought is true? Well, there are quite a few factors that influence the believability of a thought, including the age at which you were first exposed to that thought, the number of times we have been exposed, how people close to you think about it, and how prior experiences interact with that thought. So, what makes a belief? Okay, so for instance, we know that there are a lot of groups in the world right now who think that there is, this fake virus. And what makes them believe this thought, this particular thought? Well, it's their social circle, their exposure to information, their education, their childhood, their experiences with this thought. And although most of us would not agree with this thought at all, we can kind of understand to some capacity how really particular circumstances can come together and make a person believe this thought. So when it comes to the actual process of turning a thought into a belief, we have quite a bit of insight into this process from the neuroscience of learning. And we know that in order to transfer information from short-term memory to long-term memory, we need attention and repetition, and sleep, of course. In essence, thoughts become beliefs through attention and repetition, also known as rehearsal. And if we continuously think a particular thought in our heads, the mechanisms that create the thought in our brain will improve, and the retrieval of this thought will become easier. This is why beliefs we have held for so long are so easy to think. But be warned, oftentimes people think that when a thought comes really easily to our minds, it is true. But this is actually a fallacy. Just because a thought comes really easily or frequently does not actually mean it's true. It just means that you are really well practiced in thinking this thought. So if we can come to the conclusion that beliefs are under our control, because focusing and repeating certain thoughts is under our control, we can start the real work in achieving our goals. And just like learning any new skill, thinking thoughts on purpose and managing your mind takes a lot of practice. And in my experience, this is the only productivity hack that actually really works. And I have a funny little graph here, and you'll see some funny memes and graphs throughout this presentation. And that is on purpose because we know positive emotion increases learning and memory. So there you go. You're welcome for that. Okay, so some of you might be familiar with the CBT model, in which thoughts, emotions, and actions, not to be confused with CBD, essentially thoughts elicit emotions, and all emotions have action tendencies. And an action tendency is just something that most people will do based on a certain emotion. And so thoughts are often appraisals of our environments and our internal states. So these appraisals result in particular emotions in our bodies, which will result in potential actions that will benefit our survival. And for example, we have all kind of been in this situation, right, with the to-do list. So we look at the to-do list, we see all the tasks, and we think, I will never get this done. And then the emotion from that thought, I will never get this done, is overwhelm. And then the action tendency of overwhelm is actually avoidance or inaction. So it kind of is a very linear, almost mathematical process that happens in this scenario that we often aren't very well aware of. And once you do become aware, it starts to become a lot easier. So now you don't want to do the things, right? You feel emotionally bad and you want to do something that makes you feel better because you felt so overwhelmed. And so just a quick note here, though, the scientist in me really needs to take a moment here to explain that according to appraisal theory, thoughts and emotions and actions actually have bidirectional relationships. So when we have a particular thought based on an emotion, this actually has a name. It's called emotional reasoning. And according to CBT, this is a cognitive distortion. So if we extrapolate objective truth about our environment based on an emotion we are feeling. That is a distortion called emotional reasoning. So one like super relevant example to us here is based on motivation. So this is the idea that we need to feel motivation in order to work. We kind of feel like we need that kind of spark of inspiration. And in this case, a lack of feeling a particular emotion results in the emotional reasoning that we are not prepared to work or create because we do not have that emotion. Yet we know from emotion science that actions also elicit emotions. And it's not just that emotions elicit actions, they go both ways. Therefore, the relationship is bidirectional. That's the meaning of that. And working would actually result in feelings of motivation. So oftentimes just starting an action can be so much easier than conjuring up a particular emotion. And we actually don't need to feel a certain way to partake in a particular action, because the action will elicit that emotion. And then it'll be like this nice virtual cycle. And a good book to read to learn more about this is called The Motivation Myth, which I would highly recommend. Okay, so in this webinar, our goal is action. We want to do the things that will create results in our lives, the things we know we need to do to achieve our goals. But as humans, we're just not perfect execution machines. We live in a constant balance of reward in the now and reward in the future. And this is sometimes called your present self versus your future self. I'm sure some of you have heard that term. So I'm going to call it the experiential self and the narrative self. This is kind of the terms that are more used in psychology. And so the experiential self lives in the moment and experiences short-term rewards. You can think of this kind of like as the hedonic self as well. And the narrative self, in contrast, takes a long-term perspective and tells the story of our lives. The narrative self is concerned with meaning and purpose, while the experiential self is mostly concerned with snacks and binge watching shows. The narrative self is often described as the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. And distinct brain regions are actually associated with these two perceptions of self, as you can kind of see in the brain scan here, which is interesting. Okay, let's see. And just to note, if you're posting questions in the chat right now, I actually can't see the chat while I'm presenting, but I will click out of this at the end of the presentation and I'll go through all the questions. Okay, so much of the work in creating the life we want to create and becoming the most fulfilled version of ourselves is actually in rewriting the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And the first step is actually realizing that this is a story. And these thoughts that we think are just sentences in our brains, and we can alter them and we can choose to think different sentences on purpose. And so truly understanding this and letting it sink in, I think it reminds me of like when Neo took the pill in the Matrix. And I feel like it just really changes everything. And if some of you are too young to know which movie this is, then you need to go see it tonight. Okay. All right, so an example. Let's think, we're gonna do an example. Let's go back to the to-do list overwhelm situation, since so much of us can really relate to it, at least I can. So let's say that you have a to-do list and you look at it and you think, I cannot get this done. Then you feel overwhelmed and you take the action of doing nothing, or some type of avoidance coping strategy. And so when we break the situation down, we see that there are many beliefs here which are affecting the narrative self. And so if we shifted our thoughts around the to-do list, what if we thought a different thought on purpose? What would be the emotion and action of thinking, I wrote this list to help my future self? This could elicit a different emotion than overwhelm. It could elicit something like, a feeling of caring, which might actually inspire us to take some action. So these stories we tell ourselves, like the belief that you cannot get it done, it's really just that, it's just a story. And the fact that you need to get it done is actually a story as well. All of these stories are completely optional, and oftentimes the issue is that a lot of us are telling ourselves literally the most ineffective story possible in relation to achieving the goals we want. So for example, say you want to become a writer, but you are telling yourself that you are uninspired and unoriginal. And this obviously makes you feel awful. It would make anyone feel awful. And this makes you write as a consequence, because why would you want to write if you're uninspired and unoriginal? I mean, there's really no benefit to that. And so in many cases, it would probably make you seek potentially maladaptive coping behaviors to deal with that emotional pain you just inflicted upon yourself. So let's see, I think it skipped one here. Okay, so if you're thinking right now, you know, crap, this is me. How did she know? How did she figure this out? Really, like, it's most of humanity. We just kind of do this type of thing. We tend to self-sabotage. We tend to be quite harsh to ourselves in our self-talk. And maybe it's the way we were raised. Maybe it's capitalism. Maybe it's the negativity bias. Either way, we do have a tendency toward making ourselves miserable. And this is, I think, one of the biggest detriments to productivity, to achieving your goals, and to kind of, you know, crafting the life that you really want. And in overcoming this, I think this is the real challenge to kind of overcoming productivity challenges, and not, you know, inbox zero or time blocking. Okay. So one reason we treat ourselves the way we do with kind of that negative self-talk is because of magical thinking. So it's another wonderfully named psychology term. This is another cognitive distortion, and it's obviously a very incredibly unscientific name. That's why I put that unicorn. And magical thinking is oftentimes rampant in people with anxiety. It is essentially the reasoning that if one thinks that the worst things will happen and constantly worries about them, then this worry will somehow protect them from said bad things from happening. And in our case, this kind of looks more like we think that if we don't think super stressful and negative thoughts in our heads, that we will never actually get things done. And it's just like it's like using a whip to make a horse run faster. We think that we can whip ourselves into productivity. But let's see what the science kind of says about how this works. Okay, it's actually not the best technique to achieve optimal results. And I'm going to present quite a bit of research on this, but it's shocking that we would do this if it's actually ineffective. Like, why would we endure so much psychological pain when this isn't the most effective strategy? Again, I guess we can blame it on culture, upbringing, education, maybe the slow movement of scientific research to the general culture. So not sure about that, might be a good research topic. But here, let me show you guys some of this research here. Okay, so one of the best techniques to actually motivate yourself is self-compassion. And now a lot of you might kind of be thinking, oh my gosh, she's like this West Coast hippie trying to get me to join a cult. But let me present the science. This is actually really well-validated science. So self-compassion has been shown to increase motivation, decrease anxiety, depression, stress, increase greater wisdom and emotional intelligence, increase emotional coping skills, increase feelings of social connectedness, life satisfaction, decrease in self-handicapping behaviors such as procrastination, important one there, increase diet adherence, so sticking to a diet that somebody laid out for themselves, and actually a lot more. And this is the main researcher in the field of self-compassion, Kristen Neff. And I'm not sure why there's a horse there in the background, but I felt like that it matched the unicorn in the previous slide. So we're going with it. And all right, let's see. Okay, let's go back to the to-do list. So how does self-compassion relate to our to-do lists? Well, a very real example that I see with a lot of my clients is kind of a vicious cycle I think a lot of us can really relate to. So it goes like this. You have a to-do list, and I'm just using the to-do list here as an example. You can think of whatever productivity module you use, time blocking, bullet journaling, inbox zero, etc. Okay. So you have your to-do list, and today is just like one of those magical days in which you get everything done. It's like, yay, you, well done, good job. And now, what do you do right after you cross the final thing off your list? I'm guessing you add more things to do. A lot of us do this. We just are like, oh, I did so much. This is my day. I'm going to add more things to do, right? You think that that's kind of the optimal way to be productive. So now your brain knows that when you get the things done on your list, you reward yourself with more work. And why would we ever be motivated to get things done, right? Because we know we're just going to get more work. So there's really no point. So with this method here, there will be literally a never-ending list of tasks, and there will never be a feeling of accomplishment. And if you kind of think of your brain like you're training a dog, and I'm obviously not saying our brains are anything like dogs, but I think it's a little bit of a useful example. So think you're training a dog, and if you had to ever, if you've ever trained a dog in your life, you actually know that dogs need like a lot of treats to get trained. And so if you can imagine that you need to get your dog to learn a new trick and you don't reward him in any way for his progress, the dog would probably give up. And it's kind of crazy to think that dogs have more self-compassion for themselves than we do, but it's actually true. In fact, there's studies out there that show that people are more compliant to administrating their dog's medication than their own medication for their own health conditions, which is just really interesting to think about. Okay, so not respecting our needs is really common in our culture, unfortunately. And not respecting your psychological and physical needs over a stressful period results in what we call burnout. And burnout rates are now higher than ever before. And although certain professions are more prone than others, anyone can actually be susceptible. And being serious about your psychological and physical needs will help prevent burnout and allow you to make your work more of a marathon rather than a sprint. And a quick note here, when I talk about burnout here, I'm not talking about like frontline worker burnout. I'm talking kind of more average burnout, if that makes sense. Okay, so one way I have my clients kind of buffer against burnout is to create a list of things that they do that bring them genuine joy, that make them feel happy and relaxed. And then I have them take the items on this list and schedule them into their calendars. And the key is that they schedule these activities into their calendars before they schedule anything else. Now, some of you might resist scheduling rest, but I would encourage you to change your thinking around your calendar. Oftentimes we think of the calendar as this like oppressor, but I invite you to really shift your thinking to viewing your calendar as an act of love and self-care towards yourself. So your calendar can be a place where you hold yourself accountable to your dreams and where you make sure that you're taking care of your physical and psychological needs, where you make sure that you have space and time for creativity. And it's not just meant to just be used for scheduling, you know, large group Zoom meetings that literally nobody wants to go to. Okay, so, all right. At this point, we should also talk about a crucial topic in relation to productivity, and that is procrastination, which is kind of everybody's favorite pastime that they love to hate. I think one of the most interesting things to know about procrastination is that it's actually an emotion regulation strategy. So what that means is that it is something that we use to make ourselves feel better when we feel negative emotion. And there's a wonderful book on this. Oh, what am I doing? There's a wonderful book on this by Sitchell and Sirius 2016. You can just Google Sitchell Sirius 2016 procrastination. It's kind of academic, but it's quite good. Okay, so how do we stop procrastinating, right? Age-old question. Obviously, this is probably a whole another webinar in itself, and maybe I will actually do one in the future. And I will let you guys know, but I do want to offer you a solution that will decrease the amount of time you procrastinate, possibly decrease it by a substantial amount. So I want you to actually really, really enjoy your procrastination. And I know this sounds really crazy, but next time you procrastinate, I want you to think, yes, it's amazing. I'm doing such a wonderful job. I'm really enjoying this. This Netflix show is just like the best and I love it. And I'm just having the best time. Enjoy it and embrace it. I will tell you my reasoning. Okay, so my reasoning behind this technique is that if procrastination is an emotional regulation technique, which is just like psychology speak for something that we do to try to make ourselves feel better, then the fact that we oftentimes try to resist procrastination and then we feel guilty about it diminishes its capacity to regulate our emotions, our negative emotions. So in order to use all of the emotion regulation capacity of procrastination, we actually need to lean into it and enjoy it without any guilt. And if anyone raises their hands, I will take questions at the end. So, well, actually, let me just check my chat just in case. Okay, cool. Make sure nothing's burning down here. Okay. So let's see. Where was I? Procrastination. Anyway, so we feel super guilty about procrastinating. Like this is like, everyone feels really guilty about procrastinating because if they didn't, it wouldn't be procrastination. So we feel guilty and that makes us feel horrible. And then we will need to do something to regulate our emotions once again, because we feel so poor. And this results in kind of a vicious procrastination cycle. So if next time try to find, if you find yourself procrastinating, right, in this like coming week, really get into it. Think like, yes, I'm procrastinating. Way to go, me. I'm guessing that this will actually take away a little bit of that illicit enjoyment too of procrastination and diminish some of its power. Okay, so as I just mentioned, procrastination is an emotion regulation strategy, and it is used to avoid feeling negative emotion. It is not necessarily the best strategy to regulate negative emotion. Procrastination is actually seen as a maladaptive strategy, which usually leads to even more negative emotion in the long term. So we know that procrastination can never really truly get rid of negative emotion. Only your thoughts can actually get rid of negative emotion. But one exercise that I use with my clients to help them to be more comfortable with the negative emotions is to ask them which 5 emotions are worth achieving your dreams. And most of us are willing to admit that we can expect to feel a certain level of uncertainty, stress, fear in our creation of something great. And by deciding you are willing to feel these emotions, you diminish some of your resistance against them, and therefore diminish some of their power and diminish some of your need to procrastinate to regulate these negative emotions. So you can see how quite a bit of the techniques I've been talking about center around managing your mind. And that is not to say that we cannot, I'm not trying to say that, we can manage every thought that comes into our heads. Several studies have shown that controlling thoughts in this way is actually extremely difficult and may not be possible. But what we're talking about when we talk about managing your mind, we're talking about the process is really reappraisal. And so what is reappraisal? Let's see. Okay, here we go. Okay, so reappraisal, reframing, you've probably heard of this term before, is a psychological concept that sounds incredibly simple, but has been shown to be incredibly effective in research. And essentially, reappraisal is changing your narrative by consciously introducing a second thought that diminishes the impact of the first thought, of the primary thought. Some of you may have heard the phrase, you can't control, your first thought doesn't define you, it's your second thought that does. You can't control your first thought, you can control your second thought. And this really speaks to reappraisal. It's the ability to consciously think thoughts that move us toward the people we want to be and the things we want to achieve. And so I'm well aware that thought work is not easy, and many of you may try to do this a couple times and find it difficult and then give up. And you may give up because you think the fact that it is difficult is indicative of it not working or you doing it wrong. But actually, there's really good research from Andrew Huberman, he's at Stanford, that indicates that when it does feel difficult, when you're kind of trying on a new thoughts, new mindsets, and it feels difficult, that's actually indicative of your brain learning. And it's indicative of positive neuroplasticity. So the fact that it feels off, it feels difficult, it seems kind of strange to think new thoughts on purpose, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means you need to keep going and keep doing it. And the more you do it, the more you kind of repeat it, the easier it will get. So just kind of some PSA there. Okay, so sometimes my slides skip a little bit. Okay, so we do have some strategies to make this thought work easier. And one is called a thought ladder. So the thing is that most of you here are pretty smart. You're intelligent people. And your brains are not going to fall for the kind of everything is great thought. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen all the kind of like, be grateful, be positive, manifest your destiny things on like social media and on the internet. And the thing is, this type of toxic positivity has actually been shown to be ineffective in promoting better mental health outcomes. And there's no need to go like full Pollyanna and actually just try to lie to yourself. What is more effective is to introduce gradually more positive thoughts. And a lot of this is trying to be more objective in your thoughts. So you might go more like something like negative thought, objective thought, positive thought. So for instance, if your current thought about writing is that you hate it, you can try to transition that to I hate writing sometimes. And this is actually more objective and it's a more neutral statement since it's fairly uncommon to actually hate something 100% of the time. So one way to really run your thoughts past kind of a objectivity filter is to think about, could this be proven in a court of law? If I gathered, some psychology researchers, could they prove that this is completely objective, or could they find people in the population that would see the situation in a different way? All right. So I love this quote, and some of you might not know who Cary Grant is, but he's an actor from a long time ago. And he said, I pretended to be somebody I wanted to be, and I finally became that person, or he became me, or we met at some point. And a technique I often use with my clients is to have them imagine their goal, and to imagine the success of that goal is 100% guaranteed. So we spend a lot of mental energy thinking about, what if I don't complete this? What if I don't achieve my goal? And it is, so this kind of mental energy could really be better spent in a more effective solutions focused way. And if we guarantee the success of our goal, we can actually start thinking, what would I have done to achieve this goal? What should I be doing? It's kind of like reverse engineering your success. And what thoughts did you need to think to get to that goal? And I bet you're sitting around thinking, so I bet you weren't like sitting around thinking that you would never achieve the goal, right? In order to achieve a goal, you would have had to think thoughts of belief that you could achieve the goal. It's kind of a counterintuitive way to think about it. So I found these two studies that I think are quite interesting. So the tactic of inhabiting the thoughts and actions of the person you want to be has actually been studied in looking at method actors. So for those of you who don't know what method acting is, it's a technique in which an actor inhabits the thoughts, behaviors, and emotions of their character without any breaks. So we already know that personality change can be expedited through psychology-based interventions. So change is possible, people do change. But I think this study suggests that change can also be self-driven. So these actors when they inhabited a different character and they kind of really stayed in that character, their brains changed, and they actually had fMRI data to showcase different brain regions changing, which is really neat. Okay, so how do we know that it's actually our thoughts and mindsets that are actually the best point of intervention here? As a researcher, I'm always really wary of any claims, so I want to make sure to explain the scientific reasoning here. And in psychology, we know that certain constructs correlate highly with mental health. So for instance, lack of social support is very highly correlated with depression. And the thing is that it's not just social support. It's more importantly, perceived social support. So you will see that in psychology that many constructs are measured as perceived. And the reason for this is that perception makes all of the difference. So for example, in the study, the authors found that greater received social support had only a small relationship with lowering depressive symptoms, which was fully mediated by perceived social support. Meaning that participants in the study might have had all of the social support in the world, but if they did not perceive it in their thoughts, in their brains, if they did not perceive the support in being there, then they had none of the positive benefits of the social support. And I know we all know somebody like this. You know, they might have a lot of friends or they might have a lot of family members, but they just they have this giant negativity bias and they don't really see it. And any other person in their situation would have quite a bit of gratitude for their situation, but it's not objective, it's all perceived. So our brains are really prediction machines, they're perception machines, and they're actually quite fallible. And these predictions are based on our past experiences, as well as our current environment and our physical state. And as with all predictions, there are several that could be made, and we just choose one. So changing behavior is costly to the brain. And since moving the body and learning new things are actually the two most costly things that the brain does, it's something that obviously is usually met with a little bit of resistance. So our brain really predicts our future based on our past. And these predictions feel easy. But again, don't mistake ease with correctness. In order to learn new ways of interacting with the world, you must go through the normal learning process, which can feel destabilizing and difficult at times. And this does not mean you are doing it wrong. Remember, the attention and repetition to a new narrative that is more helpful to you is what will serve you in helping you accomplish your goals, but it will become easy and automatic over time. It just won't be so in the beginning. So there are two modes of functioning in the brain. One is reflexive and the other is deliberate. And these are kind of metaphors, right? There's not like actually a reflexive region or a deliberate region. Reflexive thinking feels automatic and requires little effort. These are the thoughts that are habitual. And deliberate thinking requires effort and focus. And anytime you're forcing yourself to learn something new or to do something that is not reflexive, your brain engages in this type of thinking. And in order to create real change in your brain or positive neuroplasticity, we need to engage in deliberate thoughts and put our focus on these thoughts. And by creating deliberate thought models, writing them down, practicing them, you're forming new reflexive thoughts. And essentially these new reflexive thoughts are your new beliefs. And so to accomplish your goal, you need to believe in yourself, in your ability to accomplish the goal, and the benefits from accomplishing your goal. And so, okay, here. So one last example or kind of idea that I want to leave you with is the kind of multiverse theory. And I'm actually reading a fiction book about this called The Midnight Library, which made me think of this. And I just want to offer you the idea that if you have the option of so many different mindsets and therefore so many different lives, almost like, you know, infinite use, most of us choose to live in a mindset in which we do not truly believe in ourselves. And if we're offered any mindset we want to have, I would ask the question, why would we do this? Why would we choose to think this if we could choose anything? Okay, so let's see. As I always mention that this type of work, it's kind of like learning a new language, learning a new mindset kind of feels often the same. If any of you have learned different languages, it kind of has that same mental burden. It's the same as thinking a new narrative or a new story that we tell ourselves. So this is a lot of my work. A lot of my work is helping people build new stories and mindsets in their minds so they can actually achieve their goals. And if you're interested in working with someone like me, or just like seeing what coaching is like, it can really make this whole process a lot easier. And I do offer 1 hour intro sessions, completely free, no obligations, no strings, with each of the webinars I put on. But just be forewarned, I do not have like infinite spots in my calendar blocked off. So if you're interested, go to the Calendly link and block an intro session to talk more about coaching or things that you could be doing, strategies. And yeah, I actually really enjoy meeting with all of you. It's super interesting. Okay, so, oh, and one more thing. I did start a YouTube channel as a quarantine hobby. I post every week. It's all new. And you can use your own judgment if you want to follow this channel, but I'm still learning. But I do kind of talk a lot about I talk a lot about the topics that I discussed here. So if you kind of aren't, ready to work with someone, or you just, only have like 10 minutes a day to dedicate to this process, to your kind of, optimizing mental health and all that, then maybe the kind of watching the YouTube videos might be helpful. Okay, so that's just my self-promotional plug there. Okay, onward. All right, so now we're actually to my favorite part of the webinar, because I actually don't like hearing myself talk for this long. So we're at the Q&A, and I usually ask people to raise their hands for the Q&A so that I can bring you on, because I think it's a lot more interesting to actually hear the question instead of all of us trying to read it in the chat. And it's a lot more interesting for me as well. So that's what I'm going to do. And if you do not want to raise your hand because your question is sensitive or you're shy, then feel free to email me, or I actually have an anonymous question submission on my site. If you have a sensitive question, I completely understand. And just one more thing here is that I do have like a whole list, like a list of resources for this webinar on my site. And if you go to olesialuraski.com/resources, then I'll post that in the chat in a few minutes. Then you can actually get the PDF of this slideshow thing. And you can actually also download a little kind of really small workbook to help you kind of create new thoughts and new kind of mindsets to help you achieve your goals. So I kind of made that for this webinar. So yeah, it's all free. Go on there and see if you like anything. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing. And okay, yeah, I see other people. Can we get the slides? Yes, you can. So yeah, I will post this here. Sorry, .com/resources. Oh, and I will send a link also out in the email that has the webinar recording in this. So, okay, so now let's see. I'm going to go to participants and see who has raised their hand, and I'm going to promote you. To promote to panelist. So we got Nikhil. All right. Hi, Nikhil. You may need to unmute yourself to ask your question. Nikhil?
Hi.
Oh, hi. Hi.
Sorry. No, so you mentioned that one way to get past procrastinating is to lean into it without feeling guilty.
Mm-hmm.
How? I mean, I feel like that seems like an impossible thing to do when you have so much to get done and you're not doing it.
Okay, but see, okay, so when you are procrastinating, you're thinking the thoughts, I have so much to get done and I'm not doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the story there.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a lot of kind of the thing, my teachings is that you can actually consciously think a different story. So you can actually kind of start to kind of push your thoughts in a more neutral direction. Because if we kind of had a team of researchers come in and look at you, I mean, not everybody would agree in the entire world that you have so much to get done and you're not doing it. Maybe some people would take a more compassionate approach and think like, oh, he's taking a break, like good for him.
Understood. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oops. Okay, now I just need to figure out how to send someone back. Change role to attendee. Okay, got it. Okay, so let's see. Does anyone else have any questions that they're willing to ask live? I know that's a big ask. Oh, here we go. All right, TH, I'm gonna bring you on.
Hi there.
Hi.
I would just like to know how you recommend that people start building the list of the new thoughts they need to think for a particular goal.
Yeah, so the worksheet that I put on my site, on the resources site, would really help. But I didn't go into this too much in the webinar because I thought it might be confusing. But what we typically do is we want you to actually put just like thought, emotion, action, and then write out exactly what is going on there. So thought, emotion, action in a linear fashion. And you can put, you know, I mean, if you want to give me an example, we could do it right now.
Oh gosh, let's see.
You can do any example. It could be like, you know, clean the litter box.
I am trying to build a pitch for a novel I'm writing. So maybe we'll work with that.
Yeah. Okay. So what are you hoping, what behavior are you hoping to have around that?
Well, my husband and I moved internationally last year during the pandemic. And so there's been a lot of stress, life changes, all of that kind of thing. And so I'm trying to get myself back into the regular habit of say being at my computer writing by 6 o'clock and exercising at 8:30, those kind of things, but while adjusting to a whole new framework and a whole new climate and all of that. And so my goal would be that I am being as productive as I can while also being kind to myself during the adjustment and not creating an extreme amount of anxiety for myself or anybody around me.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we really break it down to maybe the smallest action is to write at 6 a.m., would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think that.
Okay. So when I say those words and you have that thought in your brain, writes at 6 a.m., what kind of is the other, what are you thinking about that? And what do you think when you don't do this?
Well, then I feel like, okay, if I didn't make it there by 6, then the whole day is lost. And I know that's a wrong thought.
That's perfectionism. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's also like the people that like, you know, like you eat like one cookie off your diet and you're like, let's throw it all out.
Yeah. So in trying to be kind to myself, I'm thinking, okay, you know what? If I didn't make it there until 8 or even 10, as long as I get a couple of good hours in, and then I should just consider that a restructured day. I'm trying to think of how to rename that day. It's like, okay, that one was still productive, even if the timing was not what I would have.
Yeah.
Set.
I mean, I think that's great to have a really healthy dose of self-compassion, but I'm wondering, what do you think, can you remember what you're thinking right before those days when you don't accomplish the 6 a.m. start time?
I'm thinking about all the other things, all the other calls on my time, and I'm feeling.
Okay, you're thinking. I mean, you're kind of thinking like the example from the webinar. I have so many things to do, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I end up sometimes staying up too late at night working on other things so that those won't be in my way the next day. And it's like, okay, I can justify taking my own work time if I have already accomplished these other things. And then that.
What if you justified it without that?
I'm sorry.
Could you justify it to yourself without that?
I think I need
Could
to
you
work on that.
could
That's
you
one of the
schedule it
problems.
in first?
Yes, but then it seems like other things come up. I'm still working remotely for the law office I worked for in the previous country. And so
So
they
yeah,
might send me some
I
documents.
would encourage you to maybe practice a thought, something like, and I mean, if we were doing like real coaching, I would have you spend more time kind of figuring this out. But something that I would encourage you to think is that I don't think your thought of like, I have so many things to do and like, you know, other things are falling by the wayside if I focus on this is helpful to you. So I would encourage you to think something like, I am, you know, this is my time right now. I'm going to get those other things done at another time that I scheduled, or I always get things done, or, you know, I have planned my day to get things done. Like this is the way I planned it for, you know, maximum success for myself. And I'm going to stick to it. And that is helpful to me.
Oh, I like that. That's
Does
helpful.
that sound, yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's a good way to
And I'm
start.
sure you can think of something way better than I could for you, because obviously I'm not you, but that's just an idea off the top of my head.
Well, I think that is an encouraging thing to acknowledge that yes, that's fine if I adapt and adjust and acknowledge that I'll find my way through to where everything is.
Yeah, and also the fact that, you know, the things you have in your day are completely neutral. The fact that, you know, there are tasks in the other job, the fact that there is tasks in your, you know, creative endeavors, those are all neutral. So you just want to be careful where you're putting the meaning, because in a lot of ways we put meaning in ways that doesn't help us.
I think I do that. Yes.
Yeah, and a lot of us just don't realize that we're, you know, we're allowed to do whatever we want. Like we can put meaning however we want.
I do think that's a change in my thought
Yeah.
process that I need to work on. I wrote down when you were talking to think about what thoughts do I need to think to reach my goal, and that might be where I start my process. It's like, okay, if I could let myself think anything I wanted that would help me reach the goals I want to reach, what would those be?
Yeah,
And
and you're allowed to think thoughts that make you feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
on purpose.
thank you.
Yeah,
I
you're
appreciate your
welcome.
time.
No, thanks for coming on. Let me just, okay, so okay, so I'm not sure why you're still on here, TH. Okay, so I have Hugo Bunyan. Hugo. I'm going to promote you. And if you guys have questions and you're willing to go a little bit over, I can go over as well. So just a heads up so we can get everyone.
Hi, this is Hugh. The G is silent.
Oh, Hugh. Okay. Hi. Sorry. That was like a complete butchering of your name.
It's a pretty rare name. Yeah.
I feel you. Yeah.
First off, like your presentation was absolutely great and blew my mind.
Oh, thank you.
I had a few kind of like initial questions, but then after hearing some of the other panelists, there are more questions. So you kind of mentioned
all the questions.
Yeah, that procrastination is, you know, like a kind of negative or a way to cope with negative emotions.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But then you said embrace it.
Yeah, so that's like fun
and
little
you also said it
psychologist trick.
Right.
So a lot of times, this speaks to meta emotion. So I can talk a little bit more on this, is that a lot of times we make ourselves feel 2x the amount of negative emotion that we need to feel. And I actually have a video on this in my channel. Maybe I can send it out with the video link. But so essentially with meta emotion, we're feeling emotion about emotion. So a lot of times we get, you know, like, let's say you get like kind of a little angry at your partner, like they did something frustrating and you're like, gosh, like I'm so angry when they like put the dishes in the dishwasher wrong, you know? But then you start to feel kind of shame for being like a bad partner, for being angry at your partner. And so now you 2x your negative emotion, or whatever the quantification is there. And the reason I want you to lean into the procrastination and to embrace it is because then at least you would only have 1x negative emotion instead of 2x negative emotion. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
But the second bit of my question was like, so you said it was a kind of maladaptive behavior. So I was just wondering, what's the, so maybe in the short term, you kind of embrace your procrastination, but is there a goal where you are no longer procrastinating, and what replaces it?
Yeah, so the reason they say it's maladaptive is because it's a strategy that we're using to try to get less negative emotion. But the issue is that in the long run, most people get more negative emotion from it. And it's maladaptive because it really, it over focuses on the current self and under focuses on the future self. And so it really under focuses the repercussions that your future self will have to deal with in the negative emotion. And so what would be more adaptive is to really kind of, it could be like maybe journaling or whatever strategy is used, is to focus more on like kind of that narrative self that I talked about, and making sure that you're able to really intertwine the present self and the future self in order to kind of benefit both of those people that you inhabit, because you don't want to essentially like take from your present so much that your future self is, kind of suffering. And so you can kind of use journaling strategies, or maybe whatever works for you, really thinking about kind of envisioning your future self. And this has actually been proven to work, in which you kind of like, inhabit your future self and think about what they would want and like what they would be feeling, things like that.
Great. And my second question was kind of related to what DH was talking about. So at one point you said that everything that's happening in her life is neutral, right? And it's up to her to kind of interpret that as she wants.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually really well proven in neuroscience and psychology. Like, there's actually no like necessarily like positive or negative weight.
So where does that intersect with like morals and religion and like I could take that, instead of using it to achieve my goals, I could take that and make it a force of evil, right? Or as bad things. Like I could say, there's nothing to answer to, nothing matters. My goal is world domination. I'll do whatever I want. And tell myself the story. No, you see what I mean? There's like there's a moral dilemma there. Like maybe that's what Hitler did, right? Like I don't know. So how do you kind of temper that, or where are the boundaries?
I think that's a different discussion, but I do think that, I mean, like really using the kind of lens to view the world through your values is really important. And this is something that I work on quite a bit as well. In that you really want to kind of, and this is actually in the workbook, it talks a lot about who is the person you want to be. And a lot of us don't want to be an evil person. I mean, I at least believe that humans do want to be good, but that might just be a personal belief.
Yep.
So I think with the Hitler example, I think at least from my perspective, you're kind of getting into like psychological pathologies. I think people like that often have something, quite wrong happening in their minds. Right. Whether it be like, egomaniacal narcissism, really high on the dark triad, which is Machiavellianism, sadism, narcissism, things like that. I can talk more about it, but it's not really in the realm of like the normal population.
Cool. Right. Thanks.
Yeah, it's great meeting you.
You too.
Okay, so I'm gonna make you an attendee. And let's see. So next I have Chris Atherton.
Hello.
Hi, Chris.
Hi. Thanks very much, Alicia. That was a brilliant presentation. I really liked the bit about the alternative universe, essentially being Batman.
Hopefully I didn't like say anything wrong, because have no knowledge.
My question was on something that you said earlier on at the beginning of the presentation, and that was how we start to fill up our to-do list, and then we get to a point where we start to think, let's not put anything more on the to-do list, because if I finish it, then I'll just keep adding more. I was just wondering if you had any ways or ideas to try and counter those thoughts or emotions for when you start to get to that point that you just don't want to finish the to-do list.
Okay, so you don't want to finish the to-do list. Why?
Because I'll end up adding more stuff to it.
So you don't trust yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this reminds me of I like this example where imagine, like, I'm sure like you all have a friend that's like super flaky, right? And you like make a coffee date with them, and you know they're not going to show, or they're going to be late, or etc., right? And what you're feeling when you kind of have that scheduled on your calendar with that friend, you're not feeling a lot of good emotions. You're kind of feeling maybe resentful, or you're feeling kind of like anxious about having to, go meet up with someone that's really inconsistent. You're not feeling good. And so I would say that when we can't trust ourselves, and we, don't treat ourselves like a good friend, we kind of have that relationship. So we have that kind of negative emotion and kind of anxiousness in kind of thinking like, oh gosh, what am I going to do? Like,
but it's weird, because like for other people, I always try and do my best, to be there for other people, but it's probably not as easy doing that for yourself, or having that self-compassion.
Yeah, it's not easy because you're not used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it just really starts in finding, maybe, so something in psychology that's really well studied is called the implementation intention. So that's like a super fancy word for saying if-then statements. So this has been shown to be really effective. So what you would want to do is you would say, if I finish my to-do list, I will then reward myself with a nice walk, or with a nice coffee, or, something that brings you joy. And, that's kind of like, it feeds your soul. Like, and sometimes it can help to get distance from this by like thinking like, okay, what if I was like, insert loved one here? What if this was, my mother, my spouse, my child? Like, if they finished their to-do list, and I was in charge of this, what would I want to reward them with that would kind of bring them, a sense of joy, and kind of start doing that for yourself. And it does take practice. It's very like, it's like riding a bike for the first time. You're going to fall off, and it's going to be a disaster, but you have to keep getting back on.
No, that's great. I'll try that out. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, great meeting you. Okay, I'm getting better at this Zoom thing. Okay, so I see, Zenya, you had your hand up for quite a bit. I'm going to promote you to panelist.
Hi, Alicia.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. So my question is, I work in a fast-paced, big corporation, corporate world, and what I tend to struggle with is kind of finding my own pace and not trying to compare myself and my output with the output of others. Like you could see, like, we have all the social tools that show us like when people are, online, or when there's, you get emails, the random times of the day and night, and then you realize that like, oh, your coworkers are like working, and I might be working harder than you. And it's not necessarily that I feel like I'm doing less, but there's this like maybe this idea of not being enough if I'm not doing the same or more, or if there's some like, like if you think about the to-do list, like, oh, I just need to check off 2 more things to feel good. about the day.
Yeah, you think
You know?
you think your to-do list will allow you to feel like you're enough?
Maybe, yeah. And it's also just like comparing to others, and there's people, I think, that, well, everywhere, but especially in corporations, that
It's
give
kind
up a
of
lot
the
of their
hustle
life.
culture. Yeah. So there's
Right.
an amazing article by a Stanford mathematician called "Pain is Not the Unit of Measurement." If you search it in Google, you'll find it. If any of you are interested in this, but essentially it's like we use like pain signaling. It's like virtue signaling, like that we're, stressed and struggling. Yeah. So I feel like, you're really wanting to feel like you're enough. The issue is that we often get the causation wrong. So we think that in order to feel like we're enough, we need to accomplish X, Y, Z.
Right.
But the thing is, the only way that you can feel like you're enough is by actually thinking those thoughts that, I'm enough, and telling that story in your own brain, and actually accepting yourself as being enough. Because the way we know this is because if we plopped, any other human into your situation, we could have, if we put 100 people in your same position, maybe like 90 of them would think that they're not enough, but there might be 10 people that think, like, I'm doing great, like, so we know it's not the situation, right? It's your perception of things.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's difficult because this is not something that comes naturally to us. And I mean, I'm definitely not perfect. So like, I struggle with this as well. But I mean, I think it's really just like kind of looking for clues that you are enough. Because right now, a lot of us are really trained to look for like, clues that we're not enough. Like, oh, I didn't send that email. Oh, I was late to that meeting. But really, if you start kind of looking for evidence that you are enough, then you're going to start seeing it. It's kind of like, if I tell you to look for a red car, you're going to start seeing more red cars. It's and
Right.
If you're not looking for them, you're not going to see them.
Yeah. It's almost like going against like certain like society, because I'm surrounded
our society
by
is not great at this. Like, this is why we have so many issues, like in the psychology space, is that we're not doing a good job at this. and the data shows it.
Yeah. Can you tell me the name of the article again?
Yeah, it's called "Pain is Not the Unit of Measurement."
Okay.
It's a great article. I highly recommend it to everyone.
Thank you.
All right. It was great seeing you, or not seeing you, hearing your voice at least.
Same.
Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to bring on David Koch. Sorry, David. Koch? Anyways, I'm sure none of you can pronounce my name either. Hi, David.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you? How do you say your last name?
Kyo.
Kyo. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So no GH on the end. They're silent, but
Got it. Okay.
everyone gets it wrong. Yeah, thanks. There was thanks for the presentation. It was great. There was one part now that has kind of piqued my interest and maybe particularly relevant for me. We're making a point, and I hope I heard you right, on which 5 negative emotions are worth it to realize your goals or to realize your dreams. Was that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So like a lot of what I do, like I'm pretty good at in demand for, but there's parts of what I do, and it's where I'm struggling with procrastination. Like parts of what I do, I suppose I've utter disdain for, and I find like just really boring, and like procrastination over the last year or so, it's just gotten to the point, like it's gotten to a crisis point where letting them all kind of just pile up on top of me. And it's really like, are you saying in making that point on the 5 negative emotions, are you saying that like really, well, if you want to achieve what you're looking to achieve, you just have to go through that?
Yeah, I actually do think that negative emotion, I have a whole video on this on my channel, but negative emotion is actually part of the human experience. And without it, we wouldn't have positive emotion.
Yeah.
And negative emotion isn't in the brain, like when we actually study it, it's not actually like bad, it's just different. So they're actually equally helpful to our survival. And what I often teach is that in life, you're going to be 50-50. Like, I think it's just, you should expect to feel 50-50 negative emotion, positive emotion. And I think that's a normal human experience. And the issue is that a lot of times, especially here in America, I'm not sure how it is where you're at, but we are terrified of feeling negative emotion. And we're culturally conditioned to feel that if we're not feeling positive emotion, something is going horribly wrong. And if you kind of...
Well,
Go ahead, yeah.
Well, yeah, I live in Ireland and we're the exact opposite.
Oh, okay, yeah. So why are you making the boredom mean something more than boredom?
Yeah, I suppose I've never thought about it that way.
My 5-year-old says she's bored all the time, and I'd always tell her, I'm like, that's okay. It's normal to feel bored. It's your brain telling you that you enjoy a lot of intellectual stimulation.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah. No, that's you've certainly opened my mind as to, like, I was thinking it was a completely bad thing, but it may not, and I suppose.
Yeah, and so actually there's a more Science and Procrastination in that book I mentioned on that when our stress response is activated, we tend to procrastinate more. So if you kind of have this kind of like stress response against the negative emotion, like almost like that negative emotion's like attacking me, like, you know, it's like I can't, you know, fight it off, then you're gonna it's gonna result in more procrastination. Sorry for all the
Okay.
What do you think of that? Does that resonate, or do you think that sounds crazy?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
it's okay if it sounds crazy. I'm sure there's going to be some people that think I'm crazy.
No, that's extremely useful and very helpful, I think.
Oh, and Ian says, thanks for the tip about what to say to my 5-year-old when he complains about boredom. I don't know. But fun fact, they do not enjoy the response. I am not a favorite with the 5-year-olds who are bored.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. What do you think, David? Do you have anything else that you wanted to chat about?
Not right now, but I was strongly thinking about taking you up on the offer on the calendar tool.
Yeah, do it. And if everything fills up, just shoot me an email, and I'm sure I can open something up later on. I always love meeting with everyone. It's really enjoyable for me to meet you guys. So yeah, just know that it's flexible, and feel free to email me.
Will do.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, great hearing from you, David. Okay, so we got, I'm gonna bring Ian on since he had the awesome, promote to panelist. Okay. Hi, Ian.
Hi. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the seminar. This is really nice, and thanks for the tip. I'm sure I'll be exactly as popular as you are with the 5-year-old crowd.
I know, sorry about that.
It reminds me a lot of what my mom used to say to me. So I think it's good. But I have my question is, and maybe it's obvious, I'm not sure, but how does one, or how do I tell the difference between what is really procrastination and what is just a really well-deserved break? Or does it matter if you don't have the negative thoughts around the procrastination?
Yeah. So a procrastination is actually really well defined. It is doing something without the intention of doing it. So it's all about your intention.
Okay,
Yeah. So, I mean, but the thing is, our brains are super sneaky. We're like, and sometimes we're like, oh, I'm so confused. Like, I don't know if this is a break. I don't know if this is for, and so I encourage all of you to be super wary of when your brain tells you you're confused, because that's typically an indication of you trying to kind of like get out of something. Because oftentimes confusion is a great way to save energy.
So this is sort of a way of convincing yourself that you're actually not procrastinating, is you're confused about whether you're procrastinating or not. Is that it, just to minimizes the cognitive dissonance somehow, or what?
Yeah, so what I would say is I would really encourage you to kind of plan your breaks ahead of time. And it's really about your intention and what serves you in the long term. And so if this is something that, you know, you think is serving your goals and really helping you in your path, then taking a break by all means. Like, I don't follow like a strict schedule every day. I think that could actually be potentially unhealthy. Sometimes you do need some leeway and take a walk, take a break, but I think it's really the kind of intention behind the activity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks for your question. Okay, so let's see. Do you have any other questions? No? Okay.
No, thanks.
Okay. It's like you guys can see how bad I am at using Zoom. Okay, so Jennifer Hofer, I'm going to promote you to panelist. Okay. Amal, hold on, one thing. Amal, you mentioned that you missed the presentation in the chat. Don't worry about it. There will be a video going out tomorrow. Okay. All right. Hi, Jennifer.
I just had a question because I found that my productivity is really heavily correlated to the weather, and good sunshine automatically makes me so much more motivated and ready to go, and I can just go for longer periods of time. But similar to you in Seattle, I live in an environment where that's pretty inconsistent. So I've been working to try to build out something that's a little bit more sustainable, but I work in freelance and that's gone down because of COVID. So all of my time just sort of blends together and it gets really overwhelming to create that structure.
Okay. Why are you telling yourself that it's overwhelming?
I think because I feel the pressure to stay product. I don't want to just spend this entire time waiting for something to happen and for work to come back. I want to be able to keep going and to better myself by taking classes or by getting up at a certain time of day. And so when I'm not doing that, I automatically, I guess, feel bad for not doing that. I guess there's lots of things going on, but
what are you thinking when you don't do it? Like, so what is kind of the narrative that's happening in the mind on a day where you don't kind of follow the goals you have for yourself?
That I'm lazy, probably. That's the biggest one.
So, okay, hold up. How does that thought make you feel, that you're lazy?
Really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like, that makes you feel like crap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, like, do you want to do things when you feel that bad?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It puts me in more of it, I guess, that the slippery slope where
and like the vicious cycle, like you're gonna have to, I mean, you're gonna have to regulate that negative feeling somehow, right? Like, it's quite painful.
There's just, I find myself on the extremes of it. So I'll spend one day and I'll go so hard, and then the next day
that's
I just like crash.
Because you're kind of lashing yourself in your brain. So you're like the horse and the whip, right? Like, so you push, and then eventually you kind of oversaturate yourself with the negative thinking, and then you crash. Is that Is that right? Or am I completely off?
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
absolutely accurate.
That's my kind of, that was my intuition, but I could be completely wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why your productivity is not sustainable, is because it's coming from a place of pain. And I mean, I think this is probably like a much longer discussion, but I mean, you might want to think like, why are you thinking that you're lazy? Why would you say that to yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that to kind of anyone else here?
No, not at all.
Yeah, like why would you say that to yourself?
Yeah. Dang, okay.
And I mean, like, come on, like if we took everyone here in the webinar and we kind of like watched you like YouTube style, a life in the day in the life, whatever they call it, like I'm sure we wouldn't agree that you're lazy. Like we would probably have all kinds of diverse opinions. So we know I'm lazy is not an objective, perception of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm sure if I followed you around for a day, I wouldn't think you're lazy.
That's nice to hear, actually. So much has changed this past year and how I structure everything that there's so much of a difference in where I'm at right now versus where I used to be.
Yeah, you're comparing a lot, and you're probably using a lot of should statements in your mind.
Yeah.
Like you shouldn't, no, like no shoulds. Like it is how it is, and you're adapting to a very incredibly difficult circumstance, and a lot of us are.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, what's something you could think when the I'm lazy springs up in your mind, because it's going to, like it's a habitual thing, I'm guessing. What are you going to say back to it?
The thing that I've been trying to tell myself is just that, like, you're resting.
How does that make you feel?
Better to an extent. I feel like I have to separate myself from the conversation, because that's very much something I would say to a friend. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to take care of the mental part of you as well. Like, just give yourself a break.
Do you believe it?
Sometimes.
Okay, you don't believe it. That's a stretch. That's some like toxic positivity there. Like, yeah. I feel like you don't believe it. You just don't believe it. I think you might want to think of maybe something more objective, like, my physiology needs rest right now, and that is just the way the body works. Something like that. I mean, we know that, like, kind of the way that this year has been, and the past year, like all this like unbalance actually creates a lot of more uncertainty and creates a lot more of an energy drain in our minds and bodies. And, uncertainty is just like a huge energy suck for our brains. And so like you could think like, hey, physiologically, I'm using more energy to comprehend all the randomness that's happening, and I actually need more rest. And that's just, I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, that's very true.
Could you believe that, you think?
Yeah, I think very much so, because I can see that. I can see that in myself, and I can see that in everybody around me, that we need more rest during the day.
So yeah, I mean, I would focus on finding a thought that you can believe and working on that for a while, and then trying to kind of maybe move to something more positive or more helpful. But you'll know that when it's time to kind of transition is when this thought, the kind of like this rest is something I need physiologically, this thought becomes automatic and easy. It's just like, that's the one that comes. And that's just like the belief you have.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Okay, so I have 2 more hands here. I think we have enough time for that. I'm going to move you back to attendee, Jennifer. Okay, and so I have Miriam, and then after Miriam, I have Aiden. Okay. Oh, do I have Miriam on here? Oh, yeah. Okay, Miriam, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, I'm sorry.
Hi, hello, it's okay.
The internet is kind of slow.
Oh, no worries, we should still be able to hear you.
Okay, nice. Cool. So I'm Miriam. I'm from Tunisia, North Africa.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm from another really different culture.
Yeah.
But I think when I hear everyone experience, I think we're just a human beings and we just share the same emotions and the same thoughts wherever we are in the world. And I want to thank you for the presentation. It was really light. It was really enriching. And thank you everyone for sharing your experiences. It's really
thank you. It's not easy to come on and share your issues. Yeah.
Actually, I was seeing the hypnotherapist 1 year ago, and at first it helped me. Actually, she told me all the things you told me and all the concepts of the belief and thought and how your emotion will be translated in actions and all the stuff. But actually, the thing is that then I didn't trust her because she was I was in a depression, but thank God my critical thinking was thinking and was there because I thought she was manipulating me. So I wanted to know, is it true that hypnotherapy will get rid totally of the negative emotions and forever? I want to know if that's true.
I mean, that seems like a fairly unscientific claim.
Yes.
I actually don't know a lot about hypnotherapy, but I do feel like if there was actually something out there that would get rid of all of your negative feelings, then we would all be doing it. Right?
Yes, I thought because I thought it was toxic when someone tells you that's only me in the world can help you.
No, that's I really dislike that because you're the only person that can do that for yourself.
Yes.
Like I would really discourage anyone from, finding like someone else to do this for you, because then again, you're relying on the environment for your feelings.
Yes. So there's no way to get rid of and you will feel.
No, I mean, you're always gonna feel, we're human. I mean,
yes.
I mean, maybe
That's what I thought, actually. I
even
spent
like has negative emotion.
Yes, I spent like 5 months visiting her, but actually these 5 months were good for me because then I gained a lot of confidence in myself because I thought that's only me who can understand myself and can help myself.
Yeah, it sounds like you did get a lot out of that, and I think you maybe outgrew it. I mean, I would want, if I were your coach, I would want to ask, why would you want to get rid of all your negative emotion?
Yes, that's what I didn't ask from her at all.
Why would you do that? Like, don't you want to feel grief? If something bad happens, like, I mean, if something bad happened to somebody you love, you would want to feel grief, right?
Yeah, right. That's what I thought actually.
And there's almost like there's a beauty to some negative emotions. I mean,
yes, exactly.
It's our minds and our bodies telling us like what we need. I mean, if you feel lonely, it's actually a good thing because then you're, kind of activated to go seek out social connection.
Yes, and that rebound is really beautiful. That feeling of rebounding, it gets really beautiful. But that's what I wanted to ask you because I was feeling kind of guilty, but I think that guilt came from her manipulating me by saying.
Well, no one can manipulate you. You can only allow people to do that. So
yes,
remember, it happened, and now you're thinking in a different way, and you've realized something new. And I think it was a growth trajectory for you.
Yes, I grew since then, and I made the project, and now I'm finishing my master in renewables, and I'm feeling really confident and really strong right now. And I will never ever like trust someone who just tries to bring me on, manipulate me
That's because you just
some
trust yourself.
ways.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you,
you.
Miriam. Yeah.
Thank you for your help. Thank you. You're so sweet, actually.
Oh.
And thank you everyone for sharing
Yeah.
again.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'm going to bring in, oh, I have one more, Aiden, and then I'm going to bring in Razan, sorry. Oh, hold on, what am I doing? You'd think I would get better at this. But obviously my brain has not made the neurocircuits needed to use Zoom in a habitual way. Okay. So I think I should have Aiden on.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, yes.
Great. Listen, thanks for giving the extra time as well. An hour with you is really good, but 90 minutes is fantastic. So thanks.
Well, the Q&A is my favorite. I don't enjoy
so
hearing myself talk for so long.
I mean, comedians often say that they have the repertoire, but it's the stuff from the audience that makes it interesting for them.
Yeah, definitely.
Up, you know? So there's a lot of us on this call face the same challenge, and it's not that there's a pattern of behavior that's solid. The problem is there's inconsistent behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of my challenge would be that, you know, to use an Irish expression, I have me good days and I have me bad days.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's some days where you're almost in that flow state where you just get through stuff, you're really productive, it's great, you kind of have that high and feel at the end of the day, that's a good day's work, you know. And then the next day you could be doing the same activity, right? But it just doesn't have that zing, you know. So
why is it a bad day?
Yeah, well, I suppose you're going back to the point to make it the language you use kind of reinforces, you know, maybe a negative perception.
I mean, I think this sounds a lot like the kind of motivation myth. It sounds like you think you need a certain emotion for you to do your work in a certain way. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, I suppose it's just that I guess the challenge is sometimes I feel I'm doing something and I'm enjoying it, right?
Yeah.
And I could do it the next day and I'm not enjoying it. And I'd rather just enjoy it more consistently.
Okay,
why? So
what are you thinking when you're not enjoying it? Can you give me like a concrete example?
Probably. So I work in sales, so that presents some challenges in the last environment because I'm not out and about meeting people, doing stuff online. It's always a challenge. You don't get the rapport, you don't build up connection in the same way.
Okay. Are you picking up on the fact that that's a story there?
No, I don't. So some problems. It's like I can see all the pieces, but I can't make the picture. You know, you always make these
so I mean, I would start questioning every one of those thoughts, and I would start questioning. You know, I cannot make a rapport. Like, how does that make you feel? Or a connection?
That's a good question. How does it make me feel? It's not. Yeah, I kind of don't feel it as an emotional thing. It's just kind of an observation. You know, I like being in the room with people. You know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I like being out. I'm a very social animal in that respect. So maybe just the kind of COVID lockdown, that restriction has taken that. I feel it's taken something away from me that I enjoy.
Well, so what would doing sales online look like if it were fun? What would it look like if you found it enjoyable?
Probably not. I guess one thing is that it's when you do it online, it tends to be very structured. Everything is scheduled. There's very little spontaneity. You have to diarize constantly, and you can't just pop into somebody. I know I was in the neighborhood. I dropped in to say hello, kind of thing. You know, like talking to your client next door and talking about go for coffee. You don't have that spontaneity, and maybe it's just the relentless structure that comes into it. Then that everything is organized and there's no spark as such. There's no let's just do it now. You know?
So you would make it spontaneous. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
How could you make it spontaneous? There's no wrong answers.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I guess Yeah, it's something against guilt. We fall into a pattern of behavior. I've got used to people assuming everyone's life is now structured. We're all on Zoom calls that start on the hour and finish a minute before the next one. And it's very hard to get to people.
I mean, I've seen some interesting things happening. There's like co-working online now where people just like stream their video, and there's office hours, happy hour. I mean, I do think that there are some potential. I mean, you would obviously know much better for your own situation than me. But I think, okay, so I mean, like, think of it like you have to figure out a way for this to make this spontaneous. Otherwise, you know, some mega villain will push the button and like end the world. What do you do?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think the question you asked is, but I asked myself, like, what's missing?
You're fading out a little bit, Aiden.
Sorry, I was just saying I hadn't.
Okay.
The question you had asked was, so what's missing? And I've never answered that question. You know, I've been doing it for the last, you know, since March of last year, but it's the spontaneity. It's the
yeah. So I think this is super common. We get so focused on what we don't have, and like kind of like the problem focused mindset. So we're like focusing on the problem that we never even ask our brains to like try to work on a solution. Yeah. And so kind of like doing this is like, it's called solutions focused coaching, and it's actually a lot more effective for problem solving.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. All right. I was going to say what I was trying to, one thing I thought of doing is like, I like there's a lot of good stuff in your presentation and your idea. I've been interested in astronomy and physics, so the multiverse thing, you're good in that. Okay.
That's amazing. Maybe you guys can make a webinar to teach me about the multiverse theory.
I like the thought ladder because that's realistic, as I do believe in. I like the phrase toxic positivity because it's kind of happy clappy. Everything's good. It's just people are deluded. You need some level of self-awareness.
Yeah, and it's actually it does quite a bit of harm psychologically.
Yeah, and I do think the other thing I like is the workbook. So what I would do with the workbook is I'm actually going to look at it and do it retrospectively on stuff that I've enjoyed doing or days I've enjoyed doing it. Try and make, so why does it work today and it didn't work tomorrow? Or when it doesn't work, look at that and say, so what was missing from this when I know what good looks like? How do I just apply
and just like, here's a big cheat. I'm going to give you the answer. When things don't work, it's because of usually it's because of the thoughts you're thinking around that situation. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no.
That's something you would buy into, or is that just
no? I think believe in you can condition yourself into ways of behaving and thinking and emotional reactions as a result. You know, like I kind of accept that. Now accepting it and doing it are always the challenge, right? You can look at the paper and go, yeah, that makes sense. But as you say, to get into this, make it habitual, you know.
And it's it's honestly just like learning another language, you know, like, you know, in English, I might think, you know, this is a pencil, right? And then when I learn Spanish, I can identify this as a lápiz, right? And it's just like I can use two different kind of ways of thinking about something. And it's similar with this. You can start to find different ways to think about things.
Okay, that's good. Listen, appreciate that. Thanks for your time again.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on and sharing. Okay, so I have one more. I'm gonna promote you, or I guess change you to attendee now, Aiden. And then I have Razan. So I'm gonna bring you on as panelist, Razan. And then we will be all done after that. Let's see. Okay. Hi, is it, I guess it might be Razane?
No, Razan is fine.
Okay.
My question is, the way that I work is very sporadic. I find it hard to focus on like one thing for too long. So, and that doesn't always work well in the work environment when I'm working on several tasks at the same time, but I'm still being as productive. Like in terms of time, it's just like the way I'm dividing my time is different, I guess. So I would do a little bit of task A, a little bit of task B, a little bit of task C, and just keep switching between them, because otherwise I get too bored. And I want to know, is that a form of procrastination, or is that just really the way that I find myself to be most productive? Because I find that it causes some tension sometimes in the office, in the office back when I don't work for myself. Basically, it causes some tension within the office.
I mean, is this intentional or unintentional?
Unintentional.
So you don't want to work like this.
Not when I'm around other people, because I find that they feel like I'm wasting my time, whereas I'm just, jumping in between tasks.
Okay, so it sounds it's like a method that works for you though, right?
I'd like to think so. I just don't know how to defend it, if you will, in the workplace.
Yeah. So you're it's a method that works for you, but you're afraid of what kind of colleagues will think of it.
Yeah, because in the past, sometimes it's fine. It also depends a lot on the workplace. But if I have 10 things to do, I feel a lot of anxiety if I don't at least start them all at some point and then just focus on it sporadically throughout the day. So that way I have everything kind of going in motion.
Why do you feel anxiety? What are you thinking about the tasks?
Because if I don't start it, then I won't finish it.
Why do you think that?
I guess it's just an anxiety that I have of not being as productive as they want me to be. But also that sometimes makes me take on more than I can handle. So let's say you can do 3 tasks interchangeably, but you can't do 7 interchangeably. You know what I mean? But then if they were to throw 7 at me, I would try to do all 7 interchangeably. And that's what makes me not as productive as I should be.
Who determines how productive you should be?
In the workplace, the person who pays my paycheck.
What is their measurement?
They bill you based on time. So every 15, I think the minimum we can bill is 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything beyond 15 minutes, you can bill to a certain project.
Okay. So, it sounds like, I think you have kind of a decision that needs to be made here on whether you want to believe that your strategy is effective or not. And I think the confusion is a difficult place to be because you're essentially kind of having the ill effects of both. So there's 2 paths here, right? So you can choose to believe your strategy is extremely effective and just who cares what anyone else thinks, because this works for me. And people are always going to have opinions about what you do. Even if you were even if you focused on one task for 4 hours straight, they probably would think you're too hyper focused or something, who knows? So either you choose to deliberately think the strategy works for me, I'm crushing it, I need to forget everyone else's opinions, or you choose the other strategy, or the other path, and you think, this strategy was effective for me for a while, but now, I'm going to try something different that may be more effective. And I'm going to, maybe experiment with a different strategy, and that's what's going to work for me. And I am going to become the person who can train their focus, because focus can be trained. It's not inherent. You're not born with a base level of focus and you have to live the rest of your life with that. It's like a muscle. You can train it. It's fine. It feels like working, lifting weights. It feels horrible in the moment, but it gets trained. So I feel like you kind of have a lot of moral judgments about the kind of strategy you use, which I think is really interesting and might be worth exploring, because I'm not sure why there's so much kind of self-judgment based on a kind of strategy.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like, I think this is, like I said, the objectivity might be really useful here, and kind of just, I talk about this sometimes, is that in making choices, the easy thing is making the choice. But the hard part comes in choosing the choice over and over again, because you're never going to benefit from the full benefits of a particular choice unless you continuously choose it and you go all in each time you're pushing in your chips at a poker table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So which do you want to choose?
I do have spurts of hyperfocus, but it's only when I'm only when the task is diverse enough for me to not get bored with it.
Okay, so why do you think you need to change your behavior when you get bored?
Just because in the past I had a pretty bad work experience with a certain boss, and I think just the way that we both used to work didn't align with each other. So like my second employment was great because my boss gave me like the freedom to work however I want, and he actually saw me being pretty productive. But then my latest work experience, which I thankfully left, it was a lot of clashes, you know? So it was just like, hey, could you get this done today? And I would be like, yes, I can get this done today, but let me finish this one thing first, because, you know, I'm on a roll on that thing. And I'll switch to it when I feel ready to switch to it. And then there was just a lot of, I basically felt like my boss didn't think that I could prioritize the tasks well enough, even though like most of the time I do. So if he didn't
we call this in CBT, we call this mind reading. So a lot of us kind of have the tendency to think we know what other people's thoughts are. And then oftentimes we choose like literally the worst thoughts to put in their minds to make ourselves feel the worst. So like, I mean, you don't necessarily actually know that your boss thinks this. Like, has he actually said this to you?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's like specifically said to me, like, you have a focus problem. If this thing can be done in an hour's time, I can do it in an hour's time. Why can't you do it in an hour's time?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think what's happening here is I can't speak about your manager, but it sounds like they have a leadership problem, but because literally that sentence it's just not a great kind of leadership style. And that's like backed by research. So, I mean, I think your issue here is you're choosing to believe their kind of perception over your own. And that can be difficult, especially since, you know, we tend to be in kind of hierarchical roles. So we tend to think like, oh, if someone is above me in the hierarchy, they must be correct. But what I would say is actually going to be a lot more useful and enjoyable to you is to really consciously practice thinking that just because someone is a manager does not mean that they know really anything. Like even like, you know, like these kind of like artificial hierarchies we have don't necessarily mean anything. And it's, you know, if this is the strategy that's useful to you, then you need to believe in it for yourself. And you need to be the one that you listen to. And really, you know, I mean, there's the person out there that could go into your situation and just like, the boss's comments bounce off their back because they're like, well, that guy's crazy. Like, I don't know what he's talking about. You know what I mean? What is difficult, you know, when someone says something unkind to just like let it bounce off of you. But I think it really comes down to the fact that you believe what he is telling you. Like if you came up to me and told me like, I hate your blonde hair, like, I'd be like, what's she talking about? She's crazy. I don't have blonde hair. I have brown hair. Like, it wouldn't affect me, right? Because I'd be like, that's not even an accurate statement. So like, it's really belief. That's the issue here, is that when someone says something unkind and we believe it, then that has like a really detrimental effect on us. But if you're able to kind of move your thoughts into making sure that you believe yourself instead of believing, you know, someone else's random opinions, then that's really the work. And it takes time and it's hard, and it probably is going to require some writing and, you know, like kind of conscious practice every day. And just like reinforcing that thought in your mind, you know, writing like, you know, so-and-so said this, but I know that for me, this is the effective strategy. And I know in my like own wisdom that this is the correct thing for me. Cause like, how the heck would he know what's right for you? Like he like, you know, has like this like sliver of knowledge about you when you have all of this knowledge about you. You're an expert in you.
Right. Okay. Well,
what do you think about that? Do you think that's possible?
I definitely, because it was basically the first time that I've had any clashes with anybody on a professional level. You know what I mean? And because it was so bad.
And that's another sign that it's indicative of the fact that it's not you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think because it was stretched out over like a period of 9 months, and it was basically on a day-to-day basis, that at some point, like there are like trickles of it that kind of make their way into your psyche. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like I actually, ever since leaving that job, I tried to focus more on one thing at a time for like long periods of time and force myself to do it, but I just really don't enjoy it. And I'm really noticing that I really don't enjoy it. You know?
Well, yeah, I mean, an unkind, coworker or boss can really makes things unenjoyable. But just remember that there's actually a gap between kind of somebody's, opinions and actions and words and your feeling. So no one can actually make you feel bad. You have to perceive, there's like the perception there, right? So there's that kind of stimulus response, there's a gap. And so you have to actually think the thought for them to make you feel bad. So if he says like, you're unfocused, that statement doesn't directly go into your mind and actually like automatically make you feel bad. What happens is like he says you're unfocused, and we need to slow it down. So a lot of people go too fast straight into like you're unfocused, bad emotion. So he says you're unfocused. Your brain takes that information and it thinks, he thinks I'm unfocused, he's probably right, or whatever thought you have of his statement. And then you feel the negative emotion. Does that make sense?
I think so.
So like you have kind of this cognitive filter there. And what you can do is you can change your perceptions of his statements. So you can start, thinking strategies of like what you're going to think next time he says something like this. Like, what do you think, like, how do you think you can think about his actions and words that would be more useful to you?
That they came from a place of anxiety.
Yeah.
From his side.
Yeah. And you know what? I was actually just reading, so The School of Life, which is a wonderful YouTube channel. Everyone should follow it. He's so great. Okay. So they have this book for kids on philosophy, which is like amazing. And I've been reading it to my kids every night. It has a green cover. I don't remember the name, but it's on their website. It's like the Intro to Philosophy for Kids. And they just had a lesson in there that happy people will never try to make someone else unhappy.
It's funny what you can learn from children's books,
I know. I'm reading the book and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, how do we not remember these things? So like, there is no, and they have a good logical argument for it, but there's no motivation to make someone unhappy if you're a happy person. Like, it's just not something you would think of.
Totally.
And so a lot of times people who make other people unhappy, it comes from a place of pain and insecurity and their own unhappiness. And so, honestly, you might want to consider having, some empathy for him, even, I know that's kind of a stretch, but like, this person sounds like they're not okay.
It's kind of like the way somebody treats you says more about them than it does about you.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. And it's like, I feel like sometimes we kind of get into our own minds so much that we forget about these things. We forget like to inhabit the mind of another.
Totally.
And to think, what kind of mind would this come from?
A sad one. Or
exactly.
A stressed one.
Really stressed. Yeah.
No, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I hope that helps.
It did. It really did.
Okay, I'm glad. Okay, I'm going to move you to attendee. And all right. So, I really enjoyed meeting with you guys and answering your questions. Please feel free to stay in contact. And I will see you guys maybe in a future webinar. Okay.